Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Krys and Jesse Show. I'm your co-host Jess.
And I'm Kryssi.
We are here this week with a show all about UFOs, but first, before we get into the topic tonight, Kryssi, how are you doing during coronavirus?
You know, better now. I've been getting my unemployment. That's nice. However, I'm still making half of what I made before. That's my fault though, because I'm a bartender and I don't claim my tips, so can't really complain. But so I mean, at least there's money coming in. I haven't wanted to kill my child or my husband lately, so that's been nice. You know,
And
we've
you
got our
have
new.
a fewer dependent now.
Yes, Kyle finally went back to Mexico. So since he moved back to Mexico finally, and he's not my dependent anymore, we are getting a new townhouse, and we're not telling him the address.
So I'm also going to be moving at the end of July into a condo that I purchased a few months ago. So I've been planning, since I can't go do anything right now besides work, and I'm taking I charted out every single dimension on my condo and like all the rooms and placing to scale furniture. And so I've been planning like all of the colors that I'm going to use. I'm going to do like a cobalt and yellow kitchen. What kind of like plans do you have for your new townhouse?
I'm super excited. Well, some people don't know I live in a tiny apartment right now because we just had to move quickly and move to Columbus. So I'm actually going to have room to decorate. Brandon's not very happy, but I want like a gray, light pink kind of theme. I think it's really pretty. I'm just tired of my apartment looking like a frat house. Some people might know I have a giant tapestry hanging in my living room of the forefathers drinking from a keg while signing important documents. And that is the main focus in my living room. And I'm just ready to be a real 30-year-old and not have a frat house. Woo!
You've got the Wayward Home for Libertarians, which involves young libertarian men coming over and not leaving your house.
Happens all the time. I don't know what it is. They complain about me incessantly. I'm such a bitch, but they don't leave. So yeah, that's not
So
happening anymore.
one of the things that I've been doing during this coronavirus to keeping me preoccupied and my spirits lifted is like one of my hobbies is retail and fashion. And I used to work at Lilly Pulitzer before I was furloughed, since retail stores are forbidden to be open right now by the governor. And so I'm just like going into Facebook groups of like Lilly Pulitzer fans, and like there's ones that are like Lilly Pulitzer Dressed to Impress, where like just women will post photos of them styling their outfits, and like I just tell ladies that I think they look pretty, and it's
That
like
is the most basic white girl thing I think I've ever heard in my life.
it's one of my hobbies now. I was like, oh, you look so beautiful.
It really doesn't surprise me that one of your hobbies involve being basic.
It's true. So
Well, what do you think about my outfit? I I'm a libertarian, so technically fuck the feds. Do you
dating
think
back
your
to
Lily
Tiger
girls
King.
would your Lily girls like this?
I told them to watch Tiger King.
Yeah, I don't think they would like my style. Shout out to Kieran for making this. If anybody wants to order it, there's a link in our group. So we've also been watching during Corona time Too Hot to Handle.
Yeah, so like I recommended you watch it. What are your thoughts so far?
First of all, I love the fact that Francesca and Haley conspire. And I really felt, I was like, oh my God, it's me and Jess Mears. Clearly, I'm the Francesca. But for people who don't know, this show is it's a reality show. It's a dating show. They put all these super hot people on an island, and they win $100 if they don't like kiss or fuck or anything for an entire month. So the two girls that I'm talking about thought it'd be funny to lose them money by making out with each other. And they didn't tell anyone. They thought it'd be funny to watch people speculate. And I'm like, oh my God, that's me and Jess Mears. We would totally make out with each other to confuse people. Well, okay, I would make out with Jess Mears to confuse people. She would smile pretty.
So, okay, did you watch it all the way to the end? Spoiler alert, if anyone hasn't watched Too Hot to Handle on Netflix and has any desire to know, please stop watching now. What did you think?
So I thought it was kind of stupid that they gave everyone the money. I wish they would have just given one of the couples money, but I did find out that Francesca and Harry are still together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they are still together. I so I like my reality shows, as you know. It wasn't as trashy as I quite wanted it to be, but it was pretty trashy.
Really trashy.
Well, you need to watch X on the Beach.
Okay.
X on the Beach. Okay, to give you an example of how trashy it is, Farrah from Teen Mom has been on it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, so trashy. But I think you'd enjoy that one because it's just like basically hot people trying to fuck each other on a beach. And I don't know why that Jess and I are so basic that that's what we consider entertainment.
I mean, we're like watching the same things right now at the moment.
Yeah.
So
what did you think about it?
I loved the part where Harry and Francesca were in like the fantasy suite and like Francesca was chasing Harry around and he was just like, Francesca, no. And it
Yeah,
was
because he's British.
Yeah, it was so funny and adorable. And I was like, they're having so much fun and enjoying themselves during
I don't understand. If there's $100,000 on the line, how do you just like stop kissing someone? Like it's not that fucking hard. It's not. Like it's $100,000, you fucktard.
So I enjoyed the show. It was a really good way for me to like binge watch while I was sitting and decorating my outline condo and picking out furniture that I eventually want to buy. And then also telling Lady and Lily Pulitzer Facebook groups that they're pretty. So, okay, Kryssi, I heard like from you just a little bit ago, you had a really important phone call before this show. Can you share that information?
Yeah. So, one thing I actually talked about it on my Facebook the other day. One thing that I think is important. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I am a delegate to the Libertarian National Convention. For people who aren't libertarians, we have a convention every 2 years, and every 4 years, that convention goes to nominating our presidential candidate. It goes to electing our LNC. Basically, like all the business of the party. So you become a delegate in your own state, and then you get to go to national convention to, make those decisions. I think it's important that all candidates, that for any of them that need my vote or need any of the delegates' vote, to call us, to write us, to reach out to us. And it's not because I think I'm just I'm the decider. It's because this party is really important to me. It's important to all of us. And I mean, our platform is just sacrosanct. This is a huge, huge deal for us. And we're spending, my husband and I are spending thousands of dollars to be able to do this. I think it's simple to just call, have a 5-10 minute conversation with delegates. I mean, we're libertarians. Half of us aren't going to answer the phone anyway. So the other day, I posted on my Facebook that I hope that I get a call from Justin Amash because, I got sent a 10-page manifesto from one of the candidates. He's fucking batshit crazy, but hey, he at least put in that effort. So I put out that, and guess who called me today?
Who?
Justin Amash.
Oh, wow. What did he tell you?
So he did ask for support. He also wanted to know about, some of the concerns of the average delegates. I was able to kind of talk to him about our platform. I mentioned to him that I saw that he hadn't read it yet, and he said he's going to. And that, that's something that's really important to us is our platform. I did bring up, his stances on abortion and the border, and he was willing, because he said he's not going to change, but he is willing to basically talk primarily about, about the funding of abortion and, that sort of thing, and not talk about the liberty of it, taking the liberty of it. So he's willing. He said he's going to stay with us. He said that what I really liked is throughout the conversation, he continued to say we. He said us, which is it's something that's important to me because I don't like, some of our candidates have come in here and said, I want to be your guys' candidate. No, you want to be our candidate. Like, this is supposed to be all of us together. I brought up, Ohio's ballot access and how we have to get 3%. And he said, he's willing to take a look and see what he can do. If that means, coming to the state often to, kind of help us with that. He said he's willing to do that and put some staff in different places. But yeah, so he called me. We talked for about 25 minutes. I actually kind of felt pretty special. Because as a lot of people know, I've publicly and personally given a lot of my support to Vermin Supreme. So I thought it was really cool that someone, still found me worthy enough to ask for my vote, because even knowing that I was going with someone else. So yeah, I really did enjoy our conversation. I made sure to mention that he should probably call more delegates and have this conversation with them. That's kind of how we are. I promised Jess that I would not say libertarians are autistic to Justin Amash. I did mention that libertarians are autistic to Justin Amash, and he said, me too, basically. He said he's able to hide it a little better. So, it was actually like, it made me feel, Weld never called me. Weld never called me. Lincoln Chafee didn't call me. Hornberger hasn't called me. None of these people have called, but Justin Amash, a sitting congressman, took the time to call. So I'm pretty happy about that. So no longer is Vermin Supreme and Spike Cohen the only people that have called me. So yay, people care in this party now.
Well, that's a pretty cool conversation that you just had. And like, we now know, like, this is all news this week. And then any indication if Justin said he would come on the only podcast hosted by 2 millennial libertarians?
Well, I wouldn't be a libertarian if I didn't talk to a sitting congressman about coming on my podcast, would I? So of course I mentioned, I said, hey, by the way, I have a podcast with Jess Mears. And he said, oh, I know Jess Mears. I know who she is. And I was like, oh, like, Jess is so cool. I said, yeah, so we have a podcast together, and we've had Vermin Supreme on. Would you like to come on our show? And he said, I would love to. So we might be the first millennial women libertarian podcast to get Justin Amash.
That will be historic making.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and again, I understand a lot of people's issue with Justin coming in. Obviously I've expressed support for somebody else. However, I've always been a fan of Justin Amash. I knocked doors for his congressional campaign up in Michigan. I've always been like, he's integrity. Like, you can't take that away from him. He has some integrity. And what he's by switching and by actually switching through, the actual process, we now have a sitting libertarian in Congress. And while people might not think that's that fucking cool, you know how many conversations I've had with people about voting for our candidates, and they say, oh no, but you guys can't even get anyone in Congress. Guess what, bitches? So, bitches, we did it. We got it. And now I can rub all of my friends' faces in that. Justin Amash is like the dog poo that I'm rubbing my friends' dog noses in. So, and that kind of leads me into talking about what we call April to November libertarians. What that means, it's the people who sit on the sidelines, who are maybe in another party. They just sit on the sidelines and they bitch and they make fun of us and they call us retards and they call us autistic and they think we're a joke. But then Amash came over and now they're like, oh my God, you guys, now you guys have to nominate him. Like, give him the crown. Why the fuck aren't you? Like, you guys are retarded. You know what happens when Republicans call libertarians retarded? You get dildos at the convention. You get, butt plugs for Justin Amash. You You can't just come in and make fun of us and expect us to vote your way. Now, if the people doing this said, hey, Kryssi, I heard you're a delegate for the National Convention. I really like Justin Amash. Let me tell you why. Maybe I can help, convince you to vote his way. My DMs are open. My phone is open. I can have that conversation. But when you say you're retarded if you don't vote this way and you're not even in my party, like, why do you think your opinion matters to me? Like, your opinion doesn't matter to me. In fact, I'm a libertarian. It makes me want to rebel against, So I'm a libertarian. So technically, fuck the April to November libertarians.
So speaking of like that, you and I are libertarians, and like we became friends via the libertarian movement. We actually, as part of this podcast, are connecting with libertarians that have so much more to offer than just that they're libertarians. Like, we're trying to show our audience, like, we're people that have interests and hobbies, and like, we're also friends. And so like, we're bringing on someone tonight, Dr. Joe Buchman. We're going to share a little bit more about you with him, but right now, UFOs are in the news and we don't really know why. And so that's why we're bringing on an expert that's also a member of the Libertarian Party, been involved with the Libertarian Party of Utah, served as chair. And so he's not only a libertarian activist, but also somebody who's an expert on UFOs. And so we want to know more of why UFOs are in the news. And right now, we're all living in a pandemic. And if you ask 99% of people, like a year ago, would have never guessed a pandemic would be happening and causing all of us to be forced to stay home by the government. So it's not that far-fetched to think about and start planning for something like UFOs and what that could mean if it was ever an issue in our lifetime. And so I think this is a really good conversation for us to have now, while people have kind of like open eyes and they're kind of like wondering more about what else could happen. So I want to tell you a little bit about our special guest this evening, Dr. Joe Buchman. He holds a Ph.D. from the Indiana University Media School and an MS in finance from Purdue. After earning tenure, he left traditional higher education to develop online MBA finance courses from the University of Chicago's UNext program and to pursue his dreams as an adventure traveler, including looking at solar eclipses and trekking the Altai Mountains of Mongolia and driving the entire U.S. interstate highway system in an RV, and also throat singing. His lifelong interest in cosmology, nucleogenesis, and the possibility of extraterrestrial life led him to serve with 6 former members of the United States Congress on the 2013 citizen hearing on disclosure in Washington, D.C. His research has been published in a wide variety of college textbooks and presented to the American Psychological Association, the National Association of Broadcasters, TEDx at Burning Man, Roswell UFO Festival, and the Society for Scientific Exploration, Freedom Fest, that's a libertarian festival that some of y'all might know about, the Sonoma International Film Festival, Sundance Film Festival, and the SETI Institute's Contact Cultures of the Imagination Conference in Mountain View, California. Dr. Buchman, we are so happy to have you on the show with us tonight. Thanks for coming on. We'd like to learn a little bit more about you, but first, could you tell us why UFOs are in the news this week?
Yeah, it's been all over the media in the last 3 days. And this is a follow-up to a story that first ran on December 16th, 2017 in the New York Times. The first time the New York Times actually took this subject seriously when a group called the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences released 3 videos, gun camera-like videos from our military assets on both the Pacific and Atlantic coasts. These are pilots flying off of aircraft carriers who saw extraordinary technology in our skies that was captured on the FLIR radar, the forward-looking infrared radar. These are craft traveling without any exhaust, without any obvious aerodynamic structure to them. One of them was called the Tic Tac UFO. It was about 60 feet, but white in a cylinder, and outperforming our best pilots with our latest technology, at least what's out in the white world. So these videos were released by the Pentagon through a request made by a former employee there, Luis Alessandro. And there was some controversy because the Pentagon would not confirm that this was actually real footage, unedited, from our military assets flying off our two coasts. And they did that 2 days ago. So that resulted in more headlines, more confirmation. It resulted in the President of the United States just yesterday saying, well, that's one hell of a video. That's an extraordinary comment. Presidents of the United States do not tend to talk too much, at least, about UFOs. Harry Truman mentioned them in the 40s. Eisenhower, Kennedy did not. Johnson did not. Jimmy Carter, interestingly, when he ran for president, promised if elected, he would open up the files. He didn't wind up doing that, but prior to becoming governor of Georgia, he actually filed a UFO report with the UFO reporting agency that came out during his presidency. Interestingly, the head of the CIA during the Carter administration in the early months was George Herbert Walker Bush. There's some indication that George Bush told Jimmy Carter he would happily open those files to Carter if he would make him CIA director for life. He wanted to be like a J. Edgar Hoover, apparently. Carter declined. Bush was either fired or quit. And so those were comments made by Carter. The Clintons, well, Reagan had a UFO sighting as governor, and his pilot reported that incident, and Reagan also commented on it. Reagan went to the United Nations and talked about how the world could come together if only we faced some alien threat. The Clintons were highly involved. Webster Hubbell, in his book, Friends in High Places, reported that when he became Attorney General, President Clinton asked for two things for the Attorney General to do: investigate what really happened during the JFK assassination and what's up with UFOs. And Hubbell got obviously nowhere with either of those. Obama has appeared on several late-night talk shows joking about the issue. So has Mrs. Clinton during her campaign. All these candidates wind up going through Conway, New Hampshire as part of the primary process. There's the Conway Daily News there. There's a reporter there who over the last 3 election cycles has asked every candidate about the issue of UFOs, and they've all kind of danced around it, except for Mrs. Clinton, who had as one of her advisors John Podesta, Bill Clinton's former chief of staff. John Podesta was an advisor during the transition for the Obama administration, and reported that his greatest regret was that once again, he had not been able to open the UFO files. So this is an issue that's been bumping against the very highest levels of our federal government, for my entire lifetime and really since the 1940s, but at an increasing pace. And this last week has been extraordinary because the Pentagon came out about 2 days ago and said the videos are unedited. They were actually indeed recorded by U.S. military pilots in our latest technology, and they basically flew circles around us. Well, that's something that I think should catch any interested human being's attention. What the heck is going on in those videos? And then that opens the door, perhaps, to a whole nother body of evidence, some of which I think should be taken quite seriously. And I'll just say up front, for the people who want to wear tinfoil hats, make fun of this issue, that's fine. The Roswell UFO Festival is partly a circus. You can have a huge circus. You can have a field of 1 billion black crows, but it's the white crow hypothesis. You find one white crow, and you've proven that all crows aren't black. We only need one of these reports of non-human created technology flying in our skies to know that A, we're not alone in the universe, B, that we're not the most advanced, at least technologically, life in the universe, and C, that it's probably not a threat, because if it was a real threat to us, anything that has access to that kind of technology, could have offed us, eaten us, shut us down decades ago. I think those are 3 really interesting things. We're not alone in the universe. We're not the most technologically advanced. Whatever's out there is perhaps on the benign to benevolent scale. What might that do to humanity? Would that end a lot of petty territorial fights over nation-state boundaries? Would that begin to bring us together as earthlings rather than as Americans or Russians or Israelis or Palestinians? Would we start to see ourselves as united somehow on this one little island of life in a vast cosmos with unimaginable other life out there. I think that would be a good thing. So the answer to your question, the short one now that I've wandered all over the place, is the reasons it's in the news is the New York Times has reported what the Pentagon had released, which is these videos they first reported about December 16th, 2017 are real. And that spread through wildfire through the major media over the last 48 hours or so.
I find it really interesting that the people who originally released these is actually was founded from Blink-182's Tom DeLonge. And so now we had our private, here we go again, the free market provided before the government and let us have these videos.
That's an important point. But if you look at the body of the board of directors of the To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, for whatever reason, got responses from people at high levels of government over the last 10 years or so. Certainly has an interest in this, certainly created a lot of attention, brought a lot of people together. But among the people on that board is someone I've met personally several times, Dr. Hal Puthoff, who has published in peer-reviewed journals about cutting-edge physics. He's a real scientist who's been a consultant to our government probably his entire lifetime. You mentioned in my bio that I had appeared at the Society for Scientific Exploration. This is an edge science group of legitimate academics, most of whom have tenure at major universities. It's a rare academic who would touch this issue because it is not something that is job enhancing. It tends to do a lot of damage. You get a lot of ridicule, you embarrass your university, you put yourself at risk for not getting grants. Puthoff gave a presentation 2 years ago in Las Vegas at the Society for Scientific Exploration where, and you can read the transcript of this, if you like, I'll put a link up in the chat room. But Hal said something pretty close to, I'm happy to receive this award. They gave him the Dinsdale Award for Lifetime Achievement. Happy to receive this award for two areas. One was remote viewing. And yes, the CIA actually funded remote viewing, perception at a distance, psychic ability stuff. They actually did that. And he helped found the International Remote Viewing Association, which consists of some former government employees who actually did this psychic spying. I know we're off the deep end already, but he got the award for two things. One was the remote viewing aspect of research that he had done, but also UFOs. And he said, so why am I getting this about UFOs? I've never spoken publicly on the issue. Well, that's because if I had done so before today, I would have violated a non-disclosure agreement, would have wound up in a place worse than Leavenworth. And then he proceeded to talk for the first time in his life about research that he had done through a program that was started by former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid that put funding into the Pentagon for a program that was called a number of different things, but one of them was the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. Threat Identification Program, Advanced Aerospace Technology. That was what Louis Elizondo headed up. And Puthoff said, this really happened. We funded a lot of research. We're trying to understand the nature of these pilot sightings of high credible witnesses with multiple radar returns. Something's going on. He said one of the things he mentioned was he would like to talk a lot about the field of research of metamaterials. Metamaterials are combining different elements on Earth in odd and unusual ways. One of the first kind of examples of that was when we used selenium to create the first transistors back in the 40s and 50s. But we're combining apparently materials in odd ways. And he says most of that is classified. But there's one open source sample. And that was some metallic material that was given to legendary radio talk show host Art Bell on the old Coast to Coast show called Art's Parts. And that went into government laboratories to attempt to discover what this material was. And it was a metamaterial of layerings of bismuth and magnesium in an odd way that no lab on Earth was able to recreate. No manufacturer reported that they had produced anything like this. And it was a mystery. And he said, it's been around for 20 years. But in the last 2 or 3 years, we've discovered it makes a very effective wave guide at terahertz frequencies. Well, what the hell is that? And it was reported to have been recovered from a crash UFO. Now, here's a guy who gets a lot of government funding, who clearly is an advanced security clearance research within the United States government who's saying this publicly, coming up on 2 years ago at the SSE meeting in Vegas. So, I want to say up front, I think most of the people who report encounters with aliens and channeling from the Pleiadian Council and abductions and anal probing and that whole world of the completely unverifiable, I just set it aside. I mean, I only got maybe 100 years to live on Earth, maybe 80, 90 probably, but let's say it maxes out. I don't have enough time to deal with all that crap. I earned a PhD. I got to have some kind of hard evidence to look at to have it gather my attention. So there's a lot of intentional people defrauding the gullible in the UFO ET community. Talk about libertarians being autistic or on the Asperger's scale. Well, go to a UFO conference sometime. All that stuff away. Maybe 1 out of 10,000 reports is serious. But I'm sorry, when you've got Hal Puthoff saying that there's classified research going on in metamaterials and there's one open source that we don't know what the hell it is, where it's from, and nobody can remanufacture it. When you have the 6th man to walk on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, on Apollo 14, the first mission after Apollo 13 that nearly killed everybody. Who wants to get on the next ship out of town for that one? He goes out to the moon, walks with Alan Shepard on the moon, comes back, and of all the places to have been born, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Ph.D. from MIT, flew on Apollo 14, was raised on a hardscrabble ranch outside of Roswell, New Mexico. So he gets all these locals in New Mexico saying, hey, they told me they'd kill me about this in 47 if I ever talked about it, 1947, that being the Roswell UFO crash. But you've walked on the moon. You're a local boy. I'm going to tell you. Fired up Ed's interest, he says, and you can find, again, audio, video of him saying something very close to this. I don't have the words in front of me. I may be paraphrasing. But he says, I've been privileged enough to have been briefed on the fact that we have attempted to reverse engineer recovered extraterrestrial created technology. Okay, this is not Bubba with a beer in a boat, somewhere in a swamp that says, I saw a light and they took me up and they did whatever. This is a guy with a PhD from MIT who was one of 12 human beings to ever walk on Earth's moon, who says he's been privileged enough to have been briefed on the fact that we've attempted to reverse engineer recovered non-human created technology. Why isn't that, on the front page of every newspaper, the focus of every major media conversation? It's not. Instead, people put on tinfoil hats and they ridicule it. And that's because there are a lot of nuts in the UFO field. There are people intentionally defrauding others for money in the UFO field, same in politics. I won't talk about the Gary Johnson campaigns, but maybe we can do that one another time. But I mean, there are people making money that isn't spent on what they say they're raising the money for. That happens in the UFO field as well.
Dr. Buchman, do you think that the news is doing this issue justice right now, considering that right now we're hearing all about pandemics? And I think that people that study pandemics in the past who have been talking about this issue for a long time have probably been wanting people to take them seriously and listen to them and take their advice. How are you feeling right now, considering that people are starting to realize they maybe should have planned or prepared a little bit better?
Well, I certainly wish I had. I mean, we met with our stockbroker in late January, and certainly news was coming out of Wuhan that I wish I'd paid a little more attention to. It's also, if you look at the broad arc of human history, this happens every 100 years or so. I was talking to you guys earlier before the show started about my grandfather's diary from World War I, which, by the way, is also up on the internet on my personal website. And he wrote home every day, I'm in the best of health and feeling fine, because his greater risk in traveling to Europe during the 1917 to 1919 time period of World War I was dying of the Spanish flu, not of getting hit by a German bullet. And that was, of course, of great concern to my great-grandparents. Yes, the first part of your question was, though, how do I feel about the media's coverage of this? I'm thrilled. The days of complete media ridicule really ended. And I'll put the tipping point at 7 years ago this week, when we gathered 6 retired members of the United States Congress, one of them a libertarian presidential candidate at our convention in Denver in 2008, that being Senator Mike Gravel, a real whistleblower, the man who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record to protect the New York Times from Nixon. Gravel's a real hero of mine, not as hardcore a libertarian as I would like, but we had 6 former members of the United States Congress. We had 43 witnesses from 10 different nations who gave 40 hours of testimony in front of those members of Congress for 5 days in the main ballroom in the National Press Club. New York Times initially published an article kind of ridiculing that citizens' hearing. Before the end of the week, they published something close to a retraction. But December 16th, 2017 is when they covered these videos that Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy and Luis Elizondo released. And then in the last 48 hours, that's been confirmed. I'm thrilled. I didn't think I would live long enough to see the media actually take this issue seriously.
That's awesome.
Or to see a sitting libertarian in the United States House, and for both of them to happen in the same 48 hours.
I know.
You really must be like on like cloud 9 right now.
I'm on cloud 9, and when you get Justin on, ask him if he's ever been briefed on this issue. Ask him if he knows if any of his colleagues have been briefed.
We definitely will. So to kind of bring it back to you a little bit, how did you get into this stuff?
I don't know. I've had a lifelong interest, certainly, in looking up at the stars with just wonder and you know, as Carl Sagan said, you know, if we're the only life in the universe, it's a tremendous piece of space. Do you realize there are more stars in the observable universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of the Earth? Absolutely. And each star now, from the Kepler data, it's looking like has a couple, 3 planets. So multiply that, let's just be conservative, by 2. So there's twice as many planets as there are grains of sand on all the beaches of the Earth in the part of the universe we can observe. And the part we can observe, some physicists think, is just a bubble in a frothy mass of infinite bubbles. Okay, right there, anybody in my view who has half a brain should realize we can't possibly be alone. Just the statistical odds of that number of planets around that many stars. Yeah, most of them are probably too hot or too cold or hostile to life. But you get enough of them in what they call the Goldilocks zone, not too close to the star, not too far away. You get the right kind of conditions. Life probably evolves. And life on Earth only started evolving, I don't know, 7 billion years ago. Let's say the cosmos is maybe 13 billion years old. What does life look like out there that has, I don't know, 100-year head start on us? Well, what did life look like on Earth 100 years ago? Look at the pace of technological development just in that short period of time. But let's say there's life out there that has a 10,000-year or 100,000-year or maybe even a 1,000,000-year head start on us. We can't begin to fathom what that life might have access to in the way of technology or ability to travel the cosmos. That's so you asked me what got me interested. So from a very young age, I had that sort of feeling about looking at the night sky. And then I was born in 1958. Man walked on the moon when I was 11. I remember being, I guess, 13 when Apollo 17, the last mission to the lunar surface. I remember looking up at the moon, and I was alive at a time where I could look at our moon and say, there's 2 guys up there living in a tiny house, driving a car around for, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days for Apollo 17. It saddens me that we haven't been back in all that time. And I do hope I live long enough to see us get back to the moon. And then when I was in high school, I won a science fair dealing with holograms and lasers. I grew up in southern Indiana, and one of the awards was from the Air Force. I got to visit Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in about 1974 or 75. And that was where the 1947 reports of the Roswell crash said that the recovered material was being flown from Roswell to Fort Worth, Texas, and from there to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. That's where the United States government had its reverse engineering technology program during World War II, trying to reverse engineer German recovered technology, Japanese technology. So that was reported in the papers at the time. So it was kind of connected to that. I was aware of that when I visited there. And then I had a friend of mine from scouting who became chief medical officer from NASA. So I got to visit Mission Control in Houston, have conversations with him about what's going on with the cosmos. He indicated to me that he had a non-disclosure agreement and he would not talk about the UFO issue. And he didn't. Whether that means he knows nothing and it's nothing happening or what, but I found it interesting. And then I had another friend who was a briefing officer for the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. He just passed away last year. Same thing. I'd love to talk about this, even with my own wife. I've signed certain little pieces of paper that prohibit me from doing that. Let's not talk about UFOs. What's that about? So when I ran for Congress in 2008, I called for whistleblower protection and Congress to pass legislation eliminating any non-disclosure agreements regarding waste, fraud, criminal activity, or the ET issue, and then to hold open hearings. And of course, what I got in 2008 was just a ton of ridicule for raising the ET issue. Yeah, I think having congressional hearings and protection of whistleblowers on waste and fraud and criminal activity and federal spending would do us a world of good. And by the way, if somebody signed an NDA saying, I can't talk about evidence of extraterrestrial life, no, that's, in my view, you don't even need legislation to eliminate that. It's anti-constitutional. It's a birthright issue for every human being on this planet to know if we're alone or not. Hiding evidence of that should be a crime. And I got to say, from 2008 to when I ran again in 2017, the ridicule on that issue had dropped by 99%. They made a lot of fun of me for raising the ET issue in 2008. I had very, very little of that in 2017. And you know where most of the opposition came from? Was not my Republican or Democratic opponents. It was inside the Libertarian Party. They did not want some nutcase talking about UFOs and doing damage to the Libertarian brand. Well, I did.
It sounds, UFOs and everything, something that I think before this pandemic sounded so crazy, but now it's just like, we really do need to consider all possibilities, and that there even could be life form out there that has more advanced technology than us and that could cure things like viruses that might have the technology to help us in these situations we're in.
So that leads to the obvious question, why don't they do that? Why aren't they here to help us? And I don't have an answer to that. I do have some thoughts around it. If you help a caterpillar out of the chrysalis stage of becoming a butterfly, you actually do damage. Caterpillar has to struggle against the webbing to develop the muscle strength in its wings to then be able to fly. If you help a butterfly out of its chrysalis, you actually cause the butterfly to die early and not be able to fly. I think that may be part of what's going on here. My friends indicated that nobody's going to come save us. It's up to us to become a place that they might feel comfortable visiting. Second thing, why doesn't the government release whatever it knows about this? There was a Brookings Institution report that said we'd all be terrified, religion would collapse, the stock market would collapse, all hell would break loose. I don't know that that's true. I do know one thing for certain. If they're getting here in some sort of technology, some sort of craft, they're not burning petroleum to get here. Whatever you see in the Tic Tac video and the other two videos the Pentagon confirmed the day before yesterday are real, doesn't have any exhaust. These guys aren't burning gasoline or diesel or whatever. So that technology may give us access to a kind of power generation that would obsolesce the petroleum industry, the natural gas industry, and the coal industry. Well, those are some pretty powerful forces that might not want that to happen because of their financial losses and perhaps other reasons. So those are two kind of issues around the edges of this that we really don't know for sure. I also said there were a number of conferences in Washington, D.C. to try to put this issue right in the backyard of congressional staff. It was called the X Conference, held in Gaithersburg, Maryland, organized by a dear friend of mine, Stephen Bassett, a real hero in this field of calling on government to be transparent. He also ran for Congress as a Democrat, unfortunately, but he may come around to being a libertarian. I'm working on him. At the X conference in 2008, I stood up, I was on a panel, and I said, look, the cosmos is teeming with life. It seems obvious to me. Let's start there. Cosmos is teeming with life. I'm utterly convinced there are 0 Democrats and 0 Republicans anywhere on the cosmos except for on this one backward planet. But if you're traveling here in the kind of technology that we have evidence of to get here, you've got to have the non-aggression principle as a core value, or you would have used that technology to blow yourselves up. Without the non-aggression principle, I don't think you get to travel the cosmos. SETI researchers and scientists talk about the Great Wall and evolution of life. You know, it's the Fermi paradox. Where is everybody? Why aren't they here? One of the answers to the Fermi paradox is life evolves on a planet and self-destructs, and that's our fate. When Carl Sagan went to Senator Proxmire to get funding for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, this radio telescopes that are listening for radio signals that might exist briefly out there among other technologically advanced civilizations, he said, it's going to tell us about our own future. If there's life out there, maybe we get past this Great Wall. So I said, there's no Democrats, no Republicans on any planet other than this backward one. But if they are out there, by definition, they have to be libertarians. They have to have the non-aggression principle as a core value, or they wouldn't be here.
So basically, we need libertarians to be cool with understanding this stuff so we can get more people to join our party, or more aliens to join our party.
More of life. I mean, let's boil it down. I think the 3 of us agree that without the non-aggression principle and the self-ownership principle as core paradigms of how to live on Earth, you wind up with starvation and death, right? Force never results in long-term good. Never, right? It might do some short-term things that look good for a while, but ultimately it's about education and persuasion and peaceful connection, non-aggression, that is the foundation for any kind of life to be able to survive, certainly in terms of centuries or millennia, right? We're stumbling toward that. So, well, why don't the aliens show up? Why don't they want to drop by? I think planet Earth looks very much like, well, imagine you had out there in the cosmos some junior high school student writing his term paper on planet Earth. Primary economic activity, developing methods to kill each other. Primary social activity, killing each other. That's the history of this planet. It's not only the history, it's the reality of our current state.
Yeah.
It's maddening. It's disgusting. It's starvation and war and death and pollution. So who the hell wants to drop by that? It's like, do I want to go to, I don't know, Aleppo? I'll use Aleppo.
What is Aleppo?
I don't want to visit there any more than they want to visit this whole planet. It's not safe. You know what would happen if an ET landed on the White House lawn? We'd tax them. They got to pay off their national debt. No, they don't tax each other.
Or they would be evicted from the country. Told they're not welcome here.
We'd have to put up a wall.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they're out there, why don't they drop by? There's a lot of obvious answers to that one. If the government knows about it, why does it keep it a secret? Well, there's some pretty good, I think, fairly obvious answers to that. It may not be in our best interest. I mean, there are people who report being abducted, and it's frightening, and they do terrible things. They mutilate cattle or whatever the heck they do. I don't know. I don't have a lot of hard evidence of that. But what I do have some pretty hard evidence of is it seems it's somewhere between benign and just shy of benevolent, because they certainly aren't showing up to stop us from killing each other or feeding everybody on the planet or solving this virus or whatever. But they may very much have the same attitude of unconditional love that a human being should have toward a caterpillar struggling to work its way out of a nasty web it created. I think that's where we are.
I love where you're taking my mind this evening to some places where it's never gone before. And then the intersection in this conversation, because Kryssi is an environmentalist. And so like the conversation about aliens and technology, and their technology is sustainable for the universe when we're as human beings, destroying the planet. So I love how we're like like getting into so many topics here that touch so many different aspects of our lives. And my mind right now is also going, what's on your shirt?
Oh, right. Before I show you what's on my shirt, and I love the fuck effect. I take it a little further. And libertarians, I believe, are environmentalists. Because there's a lot of futurists thinking about things like Dyson spheres. If you advance, you capture all the energy from your star. That's a type 2 civilization. And that was in the news about a year ago, that we thought we had Kryssi star that was dimming and brightening in a way that was consistent with some sort of mega structure around the star. Here's what I think happens if you really adopt non-aggression and self-ownership as core values, and you cook that on a planet for, let's say, 10 million years. Planets aren't safe. You know, we do have a virus down here. We also have earthquakes and tsunamis and, you know, crazy risks of living on a planet. I think advanced life eventually builds its cities out in space and returns its planetary origin to a big national park. And you live out there in some sort of very safe, very cool, orbiting the planet, or maybe orbiting the star in a trailing orbit. And you let the beings who evolved be able to go visit that planet in a natural state. I think that's
so fun.
Libertarians and environmentalists ought to intersect there powerfully, and it's kind of the part of the history of the Libertarian Party that derives from Robert Heinlein in science fiction. But now I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts. UFOs are real. It's the government that doesn't exist. So it's really true. I mean, okay, so government exists. But what government says it does is good in the world. And that doesn't exist. Government does exactly zero overall, balancing it out, good in the world. So they do a few good things and they publicize that a lot, and maybe they look good for a temporary amount of time. But in the long term, and when you balance both ends of the books, no, government doing good is not real. UFOs, though, are. There's real stuff happening out there. And again, it may be 1 out of the 10,000 reported cases, but there's enough going on that it's caught my attention, especially when you have, you know, people like Dr. Putoff and Dr. Mitchell from the Apollo program, Bob Salas, military officer who was in a Minuteman base in the 60s and has just recently come forward. He was a witness at the citizens hearing in 2013, but he's also published a book. I mean, these are people of high credibility with multiple witnesses and coincident radar reports. That shouldn't be ridiculed. The rest of it, I don't know. I just don't have a lot of time to spend, you know, trying to discern whether somebody's report of something they saw or were told by an alien is real. It's just, in scholarly activity, it's I don't want to say garbage, but it's not something that can go anywhere. Whereas things with multiple witnesses, military pilots especially, radar returns, physical evidence, metamaterials that can't be created on Earth right now. Man who walked on the moon saying he had been brought into the Pentagon and briefed, in part because he grew up in Roswell, of all places, where he heard about that crash in 47 or whatever occurred. Yeah, that stuff ought to be getting all of our attention, and especially politically. It's not something a political candidate can talk about without ridicule. I've talked to several friends who are campaign managers, not only in the Libertarian Party, but elsewhere. And I'm like, when are we going to get to the tipping point where we have a political candidate say, if I'm elected, I don't know if they want to do what I want to do, but pass legislation limiting those NDAs and let's have some open hearings. I'd like to see that happen. And that's part of what I work for, you know, in my political activism as well. By the way, the best candidate for that was Hillary Clinton. She was the one that was talking about it 3.5, 4 years ago.
So have you had any personal experiences with like UFOs or
not
anything?
that I remember? No, I have nothing. I have an RV, and I should, for accuracy, correct. I have not driven the interstate highway system of North Dakota, nor Alaska, nor Hawaii, but I've been most everywhere else around the United States. And I've probably spent 100 nights over 22 years camped out on the Bureau of Land Management land just outside of the border of Area 51. Probably every third time I go up there, or every third night if I'm there for more than 3 days, I will see or hear something that catches my undivided attention. Low-flying military jets. I've seen stealth bombers and aircraft up there. In the middle of the night, I've heard a low rumbling coming from toward the base that maybe was a rocket engine being tested. I've seen them drop flares. I've heard a lot of sonic booms. There's only one thing that occurred that I don't understand. It was early in the morning. I had gotten up before sunrise. I had a spotting scope used mostly for spotting wildlife, and I had pointed it at the base, and I saw what looked like a cloud just tooling along right over the ridge line above the base. And I looked with my eyes. I couldn't see it. I looked back through the spotting scope. I looked again. I thought about grabbing a camera. Of course, there's no time. I looked through the spotting scope, and I saw it tilt, and on the bottom were three bright white lights, like a classic triangle sighting of something that would have been huge to have been that far away and over the base. So I may have seen a large flying triangle in the daytime, which is a very rare sighting. People have seen these things at night. But no, as far as I know, I've never met an alien. I've never been abducted. I've never seen non-human created technology, but you know, I have talked to Dr. POTUS, who's held it in his hand, and I believe him. And I sure hope to before I die, right? Don't we all?
Well, it seems like your luck is going really well.
There you go, the tinfoil hat.
So this isn't, now mind you, Jess and I are both 100% like, we know, obviously there's life out there. I think what we wanted to wear our hats for is so you can explain to us what are some false perceptions that individuals hold, or false perceptions people hold of individuals that study extraterrestrials. Do they think you're like this?
Well, yeah, I would say we're not all nuts. That's the same answer I have for libertarian. You know, it's hard to get over the Orlando convention with a guy stripping to his underwear or having a presidential candidate wearing a boot on his head. I mean, I'm not even sure the UFO nuts are that nutty. I would say that that criticism is deserved, just like it's deserved for us. We should take that criticism in and take a look. Not necessarily change, but certainly take a look. I've encountered individuals who in my, I'll just use the word judgment, maybe it's too harsh, are defrauding people, making money in this field, selling books, videos, crowdsource funding, charging exorbitant fees for contact experiences, you know, out in the desert or somewhere. Gosh, I wish that was more of a crime. But, you know, we live in a country where you're free to take money from fools, you know, and it's not just UFO people who do that. It's, you know, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, if you want, from the religious fraud that they pulled, or in various political campaigns or whatever. And yeah, it's not unique to the UFO field. So I got it. I'm with you on that criticism. Chuck it aside. But don't throw out all the evidence, you know? That's the thing I would say to people. If you say you're confident, aliens don't. I was watching a YouTube channel the other day where a dear friend of mine was asked the question, do aliens exist? And he said, nope, don't believe it. The only reason you get that kind of knee-jerk reaction is you've never really looked at the evidence. You haven't read what people with security clearances have said, or what a moonwalking Apollo astronaut said, or you haven't looked at these videos. By the way, this was before the videos came out, so I'm going to call my friend and see if he's seen them and maybe his attitude changed. There's certainly something there worthy of study. The other thing I would say, and it's a false belief or premise, is that every contact experience is real, you know, that they're here either to save the world or to eat us. And, you know, no, there's no hard evidence of that, at least that I've seen. It becomes a religion in that sense. You know, I live in Utah. I'm not Mormon. But a lot of my friends here believe that a 14-year-old boy had an angel come visit and they dug up golden plates and there was a book and it got translated. Well, obviously, if I believed that, I would become a Mormon. I'm not, so I don't believe it. So the question that bothers me is, do you believe in UFOs? I'm sorry, belief belongs in the field of religion, not science. The more discerning question is to ask, is there any hard evidence of non-human created technology or biology from off planet Earth? Is there any hard evidence of that? And I'm passionate about saying the answer is yes. And people who dismiss it out of hand simply haven't looked. They've seen the circus and gone, well, this is nuts. The same way people outside the Libertarian Party say, Oh, the libertarians, they're just all nuts. They just want to get Trump reelected. They're going to take votes away from the Democrat. Screw them. And they never look at the core principles that Dave Nolan and John Hospers and those early heroes of this movement founded around, hey, human life ought to be organized around non-initiation of aggression and the right of self-ownership. And let's look at the field of philosophy in that perspective, and then from those two paradigms derive a principle-based politics. Instead of just going for the lesser of two evils or the easy win, that's what's going to give us life that our grandchildren will benefit from, and let's work for that. So I think both are dismissed in similar ways. And, I'm the libertarian UFO nut. This is great. I got both of them going on. Hey, what a week. The New York Times and every other media is covering the Pentagon, and we now got a little yellow dot on one of the 435 seats. Woohoo!
I've never put on a tinfoil hat before, and I'm holding it together with seeing Kryssi and hers. So I'm just going to remove my hat since we're having some really serious and interesting conversations.
I think if aliens are here, I may have met some. There's 80,000 people who form a temporary community. In my view, based on non-aggression and self-ownership. It's kind of voluntary socialism, if you want. It's called Burning Man. It's happening out in the Nevada desert. And so you got your tinfoil hat. I brought one of my mini Burning Man wigs.
Oh, okay. I'll put my hat back on. I love
Let's
it.
just look crazy. We're wearing our libertarian.
Should I wear this to the convention if we have it in person? No. And then it's on C-SPAN. Then you're doing damage to the party. You'll
need a dildo.
I've got a lovely photo from 2008 of me standing next to Star Child dressed as the Statue of Liberty with a banner that says, "I miss America." Star Child opened up this whole world to me. Yeah, I gotta take this off because it's well, I don't know. Maybe this is what alien hair looks like. Wouldn't that be cool? You could grow up having
aliens.
Do you think it's possible? You kind of mentioned it. Do you think it's possible that there's just aliens walking around right now? Like, we don't know what they look like, right? They could be bugs. They could be the deer. Could be aliens.
I don't know. I do have friends who I respect who think that's a real possibility. That there's hybrids or that alien life that really wants to see what's going on with humanity might be here. It just goes down into a rabbit hole that leads me nowhere and wastes my time. I have no hard evidence of that. I don't believe it's true. I mean, there's people who say the Queen of England is a reptilian, and I forget, every president's been a reptilian or whatever alien. And I just no. I mean, you gotta have something more than a belief in that to get my attention, at least. On the other hand, I mean, there's Star Trek episodes where we think we're out traveling around, and yeah, we dress up as the aliens to go check out that planet. It's not a story that's outside of the realm of kind of reasonableness. I wish it were true. I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with one of them. You got my video here. If you think I'm a nice guy, come on over. I don't believe that. I certainly don't have any evidence of it. But I do have friends who do believe that, who I respect.
Well, if anything, if there are aliens, I guarantee you, or if there is aliens on Earth, I guarantee you they're watching our show.
I believe that. I also believe that if there are aliens that are interested in Earth, they would probably come to Burning Man, where they would be completely invisible. Like they would not be the weirdest thing there. Okay.
We need to take this show to Burning Man next time there is a Burning Man.
I don't know that it'll ever happen again. The organization is suing the Bureau of Land Management. I'm not sure Burning Man would have happened without the virus. There was certainly a lot of uncertainty about that. The Bureau of Land Management, in my view, has extorted the Burning Man organization for tens of millions of dollars. They don't follow their own legal requirements involving their transparency of what they've spent all that money on to, quote, manage Burning Man. That's what, after 6 years, I think, of protesting their inability to follow their own policies, caused the organization to sue them last fall, I believe. And then the virus came along. It was like a double whammy. So this year became obvious was out early on. But without a vaccine and without some way to manage this disease, I'm not sure even, what would it be, 16 months from now, you could get 80,000 people from all over the world together in a pretty unsanitary environment for a week. I don't know. It may be a couple, 3 years before Burning Man happens again. in terms of the Burning Man that occurs as a city out in the desert, the Burning Man movement with the 10 core principles, which I could rattle off for you, but I won't, is out there in the regional burns and out there in Burners Without Borders and people doing community service work and trying to bring this art community beyond the desert. That's happening. And maybe this is a good thing. I met the Dalai Lama once. I'm just going to go completely 90 degrees. I met the Dalai Lama actually.
Cool.
I met the Dalai Lama several times. It was ridiculous. His Holiness has an older brother, Thupten Norbu, who was a professor of Mongolian and Tibetan at Indiana University. And when I taught there, I got to know him. He was Uncle Norbu to our kids. His Holiness gave a talk at Long Beach that I was at, and I got to meet with him privately, a group of about 20 people. And they asked for ideas about what he should talk about. So I made a request. I gave him a hadak from Mongolia, a kata prayer cloth that Norbu had given me. And I said, this was given to me about your brother. I would like for you to have it. I'd like for you to wear it on stage. And my request is that you tell a story about your older brother, Norbu, who was 15 years older. So he just smiled and blessed it and gave it back to me. And then he talked about Norbu on the stage. But one of the things the Dalai Lama said, he was asked by somebody else who had a much better question than mine. Who's your favorite teacher? From who have you learned the most? This is the reincarnation of the Buddha of compassion. Norbu, I'm going on a little tangent. I'm going to come back to that moment. Norbu felt the rape of Tibet by the Chinese government warranted a war. He had bumper stickers that said, "Free Tibet, raise an army, get the Chinese out, give Tibet back to the Tibetans." His younger brother, His Holiness, the Buddha of Compassion, said, no, we all got to live together. And his bumper stickers say, "Save Tibet." So if you've ever seen one of those bumper stickers, "Save Tibet" was the Dalai Lama, "Free Tibet" was Norbu. So in Long Beach, in front of 30,000 people, this man who's been driven out of his home in Lhasa, who the Chinese government may be a threat for to the point that he has all sorts of security around him, or at least did when he was younger, certainly did when I was around him, said, "My greatest teacher is the Chinese. I'm so grateful to the Chinese for coming into Tibet, because they took what was Tibetan Buddhism, which would have been isolated in this hilltop in the Himalayas, and spread it all over the world. And they've done more to teach Tibetan Buddhism than anyone else could have. They're my favorite teacher." All right, well, I'm not that enlightened. You know.
You have like the most interesting life.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
That is like so interesting.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, you know, I got to meet 3-6 Mafia.
You what?
I got to meet 3-6 Mafia.
Oh,
They're
cool.
rappers.
I had no idea who that is. I was pretending to understand the word.
You know what? I was trying to feel as cool as you, Dr. Buchman.
Yeah, well, no, I've been very lucky. I've lived a very blessed life. I'm not particularly good at anything, but I've had some fun stories to tell.
You're good at living.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Break open the bones, suck the marrow out, watch the movie The Dead Poets Society every few months. Just go for it. Collect experiences, not things, all that kind of stuff. Norbu built, one of the Eli Lilly drug company granddaughters gave 80 acres of Indiana to form the Tibetan Mongolian Buddhist Cultural Center, the TMBCC. And that's where Norbu retired to. It was a few blocks from where I lived when I was teaching at Indiana. And I'd go there and hang out with Norbu. And he had this vision of building the world's first interfaith Buddhist temple. So that exists outside of Bloomington, Indiana. And he wanted that temple to be open to people of all religious traditions, but be designed as a traditional Buddhist temple. It was just a magical time to be there, and a real incredible opportunity that I got to meet him, and then somehow he decided I was a friend. It was cool.
You're way cooler than the rest of us.
Yeah, that was how I kept getting to meet the Dalai Lama, by the way. And Norbu had a stroke. And I remember saying to Norbu's son, because Norbu had married, and he married a Chinese woman, which really upset the Tibetan community. and they had children, and his son Jigme was a very good friend of mine. Jigme's since passed away. He was hit by a car doing a walk in Florida to free Tibet, and somebody swerved over into the shoulder of the road, and Jigme died. But prior to that, Norbu had a stroke, and I said, well, is His Holiness coming, to visit Norbu? Like in Tibetan religion, is there an idea that the reincarnation of the Buddha of compassion could cure his older brother? And Jigme said, you don't understand anything about Tibetan Buddhism. The whole core is non-attachment. The leader of Tibetan Buddhism cannot appear to show any emotional attachment to his own brother. It's all about detachment. Attachment is the source of suffering. But eventually the Dalai Lama came and did a Kali Chakra. Richard Gere was there, Muhammad Ali. It wasn't just the Dalai Lama. It was a fun time.
That's really cool.
Now I sound like I'm bragging, so I'm going to stop. I met David Nolan. Meeting David Nolan was bigger than any of that. Honest to goodness.
Dr. Buchman, this has been such an interesting conversation. I'm so grateful that you've connected with us tonight and taken the time to share your knowledge with us. And like our audiences, we're trying to share with our audience some interesting stories and different takes on the news. So we're so grateful for your time. Do you have some last things that you would like to share before we wrap up the show today?
Yeah, I would encourage people who are interested in this, don't get caught up in all the publications and videos that have no verification. There's a lot of that out there, a ton. I'd suggest looking at the work done by Richard Dolan. Richard almost earned a Ph.D. in history. He certainly has earned it, in my view. Ought to be given several honorary ones. Published a series of books called UFOs and the National Security State. Absolutely hardcore, good stuff. Look at anything by Richard Dolan. Go get Robert Salas's book about UFOs and nukes. It appears there's a real connection between the development of the hydrogen bomb and the appearance of some extraterrestrials that might not be okay with us using too many of those bombs on this planet. Go look at the citizens hearing on UFOs from 2013. I've typed a transcript of almost everything. I've indexed it, footnoted it. It's not published yet. They've asked me to keep it out of the marketplace while the video record of that is monetized, hoping to sell it to a cable channel or whatever. But you can find the whole first day of the citizens hearing is up for free. Multiple formats, including this one, YouTube. Go look at what Senator Harry Reid had to say about the funding of this advanced aerospace threat identification program at the Pentagon. If you're serious about this, if you want to just wear the tinfoil hat and say, oh, Joe Buchman and these other UFO nuts are doing damage to the libertarian political movement, I don't have a lot of respect for you because you just simply haven't looked at the best of the evidence. I do have sympathy for you, though, because, man, some of the people at these UFO conferences drive me nuts. I think, speaking as a libertarian, and I'll end with a joke, speaking as a libertarian, there ought to be a law because these people are in need of immediate psychiatric intervention and institutionalization, right? Of course, I don't really believe that, but it's so frustrating to see the damage they do. By the way, some people argue, and I think this is an argument with merit, that a government that wants to keep something like this secret is going to intentionally create a circus around it. So you can't hide the truth. Truth is probably out there, but you surround it with so much bullshit that it becomes almost impossible to discern what's real from the circus that you surround it with. And we know governments do that. The Romans did it. Every government since then has probably done it. If ours is doing it, I think they should stop, certainly on this issue. And by the way, when you get Justin on, do ask him that question.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Now I'm definitely super interested. Yeah. I'm really interested now. Like, this is all, my dad, he's a paranormal investigator. So, really? When most old men retire, they go and like play golf. No, my dad bought a shit ton of equipment and now he goes around the country investigating.
Is he looking at ghosts or?
Yeah, he does everything. After my mom passed away, we did like a seance. My dad. So I have, that in me. My mind is open. And I've told every single person, you're an idiot if you don't think that this exists.
Yeah, and all I've been talking about is UFOs. I would say the same thing when it comes to remote viewing. Go look what the government actually funded in the CIA. Look at people like Dr. John Alexander, published a book titled Reality Denied. Dr. Alexander was a colonel with a high security clearance at Los Alamos. His book, Reality Denied, one chapter is about UFOs. Other chapters are about interspecies communication, life after death, near-death experiences, precognition, reincarnation. This is a hardcore scientist with a Ph.D., Dr. John Alexander. I should have mentioned him earlier. I'm glad you brought that up. Reality Denied is an incredible book. He also has a book titled UFOs, Myths, Realities, and Conspiracies, although maybe it's Conspiracies, Myths, Reality. I don't remember the after the colon part. But look at Dolan, look at Alexander, look at the Citizens Hearing material, look at Salas, and don't just chuck all of this out. I haven't seen a ghost either. But I have had some things occur that the coincidence level is right at the edge of believability when it comes to doing family genealogy research, where it seems like some relatives wanted to be found and others didn't. I think it's only coincidence, but boy, those are stories for another time though, but they freak me out telling them.
So can our viewers reach out to you if they want to learn more?
I think you Google me, I'm pretty much out there. My email's out there. I got some pretty good spam filters on it. It's just drbuchman@gmail. You can find me on Facebook. You can look at my family history website, bookmans.us. Go Google the Citizens Hearing. I was one of 7 people to ask questions of witnesses because Darlene Hooley had a sister who died and left early, and the other members of the committee invited me to fill in for her. So there were 6 members of Congress plus me. I had probably the best week of my life there. Another person you might look at is Danny Sheehan. Danny served as of counsel to that committee, and his stuff's incredible. He's an attorney.
I went to college with the Danny Sheehan in my sorority.
Yeah, probably not the same one. This one has an autobiography called The People's Advocate about his battles with the federal government. He was involved in the Pentagon Papers with Oliver North, with all of pretty much anything that involves whistleblowing since Watergate. Danny Sheehan has been an attorney and hammer. He's up in North Dakota fighting the government over taking children out of Native American homes for profit. Yeah, that's really happening. So anyhow, this was great. I'll be watching this from now on. I can't wait for you to get Justin on.
Thank you.
Joe Jorgensen, by the way. Joe Jorgensen's called me twice. I'm also a delegate to that convention. I'd love to talk to you about what the heck you were thinking about vermin sometime, but it's all good.
Well, we're going to wrap up the show now. And
we can keep talking as soon as we get off here. We have like an hour.
Way too much.
But I'm really thankful for you for inspiring us to just take a look at the stars, take a few minutes to ponder what else could be out there, and also just take a few moments to realize that, we're not alone, and how can we work towards a more just and harmonious world? That's what we're doing as libertarians. And I'm so glad that message was conveyed this evening in this conversation, because I don't think we hear it enough among the liberty community. And so as we work to be more peaceful with this world and with international relations, also being more peaceful within ourselves. And so just really grateful for you to have that kind of come out into the show this evening. And I hope we all everyone watching, take a look at the stars and take a couple minutes to think about what else is out there.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Buchman. You are the best.
It was really my pleasure. Anytime.
Best ever US UFO expert I've ever met. All right. Have a good evening, and thanks for being on our show.
Live long and prosper.